Archbishop, the Makin Review describes John Smythe as the Church of England's most prolific serial abuser. You knew this man. What did you think when you read about the horrific abuse that he carried out?
I first read about it back in 2013, I think. I was shaken to the core, shocked beyond description, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. It was utterly overwhelming in the horror I felt for that his victims suffered through this appalling, sadistic, evil abuse.
Well, the Makin Review makes clear in black and white that as many as 130 boys and young men were beaten, some beaten so hard that they had to wear nappies. And this took place in 3 countries, in the UK, in Zimbabwe and in South Africa.
Yes.
You lead the Church of England. Do you take full responsibility for what these poor boys and young men had to go through?
I take responsibility for the consequences and for dealing with it now, since I was Archbishop. When the abuse took place in the UK, I was in my late teens, early 20s. Some of it was before I was even come to Christian faith, many years before I was ordained. And it was one of a number of horrific historical legacy cases of abuse that I found when I came into being Archbishop in 2013. I was told about this, I heard about this for the first time in July, August 2013, about 4 months after I took over, and didn't know anything before then or have any suspicions.
Well, that's not quite true. We'll come back to that. But you say you're dealing with this now, but you have been Archbishop for nearly a decade. And what the Makin Review sets out is that senior church leaders, including yourself, missed so many opportunities to deal with this. Do you accept that?
I accept that from August 2013 until your programme uncovered this in a documentary in 2017, that I did not, and I take responsibility for this, and it was a failure and a really shaming failure. I did not ensure that this was pursued as energetically, as remorselessly as it should have been.
Well, I'll come back to 2013 in just a moment, because actually you were warned about this man decades before that.
No, I wasn't.
Well, in 1981, when you were living in Paris, the rector there at the church you went to warned you about Smythe, saying, stay away from him, he's really not a nice man.
Absolutely. I was then 25. I was a layman working in business in Paris. I knew Peter, the rector, very well. He was a very good friend, long since died. I knew Smythe had been through Paris the previous Sunday because I'd seen him the one before that. I'd been away in Nigeria. And Peter said, he's not a nice man, stay away from him. And I thought he never mentioned abuse, he never suggested any notion of abuse. This is 1981. I thought he fell out with him and is warning me about that. I never crossed my mind that this might be something to do with what was essentially torture.
Well, Makin, in his review, tells a slightly different story, because he says in the 1980s you had, and I quote, a level of knowledge that John Smythe was of some concern. And yet...
I didn't.
That is what Makin has decided after interviewing all the relevant people.
He doesn't, and I'm not quite sure why he decided that, because I know for certain that I had neither knowledge nor reason for suspicion before 2013. And having read the report, I've gone back and back and thought it through, talked to my wife, talked to friends over the last few years, long before the report. Did we know anything? And the answer was, in fact, I had a text a few minutes ago saying, you did not know anything, from one of my longest standing friends.
Well, you know, Makin decides at a later date that you were being insufficiently curious, and I wonder whether that was so the whole way through, because you knew in the 1980s, you know, you went to the camps and so on. You exchanged Christmas cards with John Smythe after he moved to Zimbabwe. He continued to abuse boys there, and I see you don't know about that. But you also funded his mission out there. I mean, that suggests that this was more than a passing acquaintance with this man.
Lots of people funded his mission. Funding his mission, I mean, I don't know what its spending was, but it was a lot, I suspect. I have no idea. I never saw the accounts. I think on 2 separate occasions, I gave 40 or 50 pounds. That is not funding his mission.
Right. Makin says you couldn't remember how much you gave or when it was.
I think it was about 40 or 50 pounds, and certainly it might have been not at all. I think I said to Makin that it was that I may well have done so, and he took that as saying I did. I had no personal contact with him. I think I may have got a newsletter once a year. I didn't know what was going on. I'd known him at Ewan. I thought he must be doing good work. I certainly, if I had the slightest suspicion of abuse, I would not under any circumstances have funded him.
Do you know,
alone sent, Christmas cards.
I mean, do you know whether you were still contributing to his mission when a boy in Zimbabwe was found dead at one of John Smythe's camps, and John Smythe was then charged with culpable homicide?
He was charged in Zimbabwe. I didn't know about that until 2013 either. I don't know. If I gave any money at all, it would have been in the mid-80s. I did write to the boy's parents, I think, after 2013 to express my horror.
I mean, the fact that you contributed to this man's mission in Zimbabwe where a boy died, how does that make you feel now?
I wish I hadn't, but I didn't know anything, so there was no reason not to.
Right, well, in 2013, you did know quite a lot.
I was told by my chaplain in 2013, back in July, early August.
And John Smythe was then in South Africa. And you were informed that the Bishop of Ely had written to a bishop in Cape Town detailing the seriousness of the abuse. Now, when we spoke in 2019, after my investigation, you said, and just to quote back to you, you said, I genuinely had no idea that there was anything as horrific as this going on. If I'd known that, I'd have been very active, but I had no suspicions at all. I mean, no suspicions at all. You'd just been informed of the seriousness of John Smythe's abuse in 2013.
I was told there was an accusation of abuse, and this is where I went wrong. Safeguarding at that point had one person for the national part of the Church of England half-time. We're now around 40. And those are reforms I brought in myself. At that time, I asked the necessary questions, which was, I did right, which was to say, have the police been informed, have social services been informed? I was told they had. I didn't chase it up. I didn't follow it up. That is my fault, and I was wrong. I should have said, what's the evidence? I asked about South Africa. I was told they'd written to the Bishop of Grahamstown, which covered the area where John Smythe was living. And I was told that indeed they'd written and that they had not had a reply, and that the Darson safeguarding advisor in Ely had followed up 3 times and not managed to get a reply. That's not unusual in these cases abroad.
But the fact that you didn't follow it up, even though you'd been handed this letter setting out the seriousness of his abuse.
I wasn't handed the letter till later in the year, as it happens, but that doesn't excuse it. The point is that I failed to do more than on a very regular basis say, what is going on? Where are we? I did that verbally. I didn't have a system. There wasn't a process. There weren't people in place. I should have recognized that weakness, that lack of capacity to deal with it, and have done something about it, hired someone in.
But this isn't about, delegating the problem, getting someone else.
But it's about getting someone to follow up and to make sure it's happening.
Did you not think, when you saw that man's name, did you think, oh, I shared a dormitory with him, I exchanged Christmas cards with him, I funded his mission? Did you not think, I must make sure and do everything I personally can to ensure that no other victims in South Africa suffer what all those poor victims suffered in the UK and then Zimbabwe?
It wasn't until rather later, tragically, that we saw the Ruston report, which detailed
This was the secret report in
the
1982.
secret report. And when you read that, you just wanted to go and be sick. I mean, it was infinitely worse than the verbal report I was given. In 2013, a huge number of historic cases were emerging, including Peter Ball and people, and they were coming up every week, and this was another one, a surprising one, but it was another one. And I thought, you know, I did what I did with the others, which is to say, okay, who's dealing with it? What are we doing? We were straining every sinew to try and cope with this flood of cases. But on this one, I didn't do enough, and Makin quite rightly points to that.
And he says that you failed in your personal and moral responsibility to ensure that the church in South Africa knew of the dangers. You accept that?
It's a phrase he uses. I'm not entirely sure I understand what he means.
Why are you ducking this now, though?
I'm not ducking, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying it's a phrase he uses. I'm not entirely sure what it means. But what I know is I failed to do the necessary. I failed to do the necessary.
I mean, you're saying this now, but in 2019, you were quite keen in that interview with me to try and minimize it. And Makin says that what you said to us in 2019 was one of many incorrect assertions. Was it a lie because the victims say it was?
No, it wasn't. I don't lie on interviews. If I can't tell the truth, I don't answer the question. And I say I'm not going to answer the question. It certainly wasn't. It was what I thought had happened when I got, as the details came out more and more, as we got more and more people in the safeguarding team, I realized that on one or two things, fewer than are in the report, I had been inaccurate. And I said that to a number of people here. I got that wrong.
But why have we waited until now to have the truth dragged out of you? Because a lot of victims, they've been waiting 7 years for this report. They've been waiting decades since they were first abused.
I can't speak for the period before I knew, which is before 2013. You know, that's beyond my control.
That's now over a decade.
Yeah, that's now over a decade. In 2019, I commissioned, or I asked to be commissioned, a report by Mr. Makin. We were told it'd be about 9 months. For various reasons, it turned into 5 years. I have never been able to get to the bottom of this. And we've been pushing very hard for 3 years and saying, where is this report? So it's been an extra 5 years. We should reasonably have had it in 2020 or 2021. And then we'd have been having this conversation then. Why did it take from 2017 to 19? I can't do more than say I got it wrong.
Well, you can. I mean, the victims are calling for your resignation.
I know, and I understand why they're doing that. What happened, I was given advice about police inquiries and don't interfere and this sort of thing. And now we have a system that we put in place because of this, long before this report, that would prevent me not doing something and being given that advice. I shouldn't have taken the advice. My heart said, see them, and I should have followed my heart on that. It's my fault.
You said just now that when you can't tell an honest answer, you avoid the question. You've just avoided the question, which was the victims want you to resign. Will you resign?
I've been giving that a lot of thought for actually quite a long time. There's nothing over the last 10 years that has been as horrible as dealing with not just this one, but innumerable other abuse cases, as you will see from the ICSA inquiry. and other things. I've given it a lot of thought. I've taken advice as recently as this morning from senior colleagues. And no, I'm not going to resign for this. If I'd known before 2013 or had grounds for suspicion, that would be a resigning matter then and now. But I didn't.
But you considered it as recently as this morning?
Yes.
What stopped you?
I want us to have a safer church that has taken the lesson of this and has, frankly, I want independent safeguarding where nobody can slow things up and conceal things.
So responsibility for safeguarding is taken away
No,
from the church?
responsibility must stay, but the way it's handled must be independent. So responsibility, if you take responsibility away from the church, what will happen? I dread to think. You've got to say, you, Bishop, you are responsible. But when you find something, you hand it to the safeguarding officer who deals with it, and you have no authority to interfere at all.
And that's the only reason you're staying, to see that through?
There are other things I'm involved in which are also about seeing things through, outside safeguarding and important.
You're not the only person criticised in this report. Former Archbishop George Carey, 9 bishops, dozens of clergymen, they all failed too.
Yeah.
And, you and your colleagues, according to Makin, displayed a distinct lack of curiosity and a tendency to minimising this serious matter. That's what he says. So will any of you resign? Will anybody resign as a result of this report?
I don't know if it's up to people to make up their own minds. I do know that that the people who deal with this sort of thing, because quite rightly it's not in my hands, are looking at what the appropriate action to take is against those who concealed and or deceived about these matters, about this terrible abuse. Minimise. I don't minimise that.
Yeah, but the church was involved in a cover-up.
The church was involved in a cover-up.
And, there are multiple opportunities that Makin identifies that he says you personally missed, yet you have decided not to resign. Why not?
Because I keep coming back to this, but it's very hard to find another answer. Because there were no opportunities for me to know before 2013. After 2013, it was investigated. I didn't personally lead that investigation for the reason that bishops aren't allowed to, and quite rightly, because there's the danger that they will cover it up. I pushed hard for no cover-up and for attention to victims. I didn't push hard enough. I didn't care sufficiently. You can name, there are any number of reasons, a million other things going on, a failure, I don't know.
But you have accepted failings. You have accepted...
Oh, of course I do. I've said that.
But none of them are resignation matters.
I don't think they're resignation matters. I've taken advice, I've thought about it, I've reflected on it. Covering what we would, in the church, what church law considers a really sort of hanging offence, is covering up abuse.
And abuse was covered up. And those people...
It was very successfully covered up.
Right, and so the people named in the report who covered up the abuse, they will resign, they'll be sacked.
Well, quite a lot of them have died, so...
Yeah, but there are surviving...
There are
There are 9 bishops.
Not
all of them have retired.
No, not all of them have retired. One of the bishops mentioned in the report, and quite rightly, and I agree with what the report says on here, himself, Andrew Watson, the Bishop of Guildford, quite rightly said, admitted that he had been abused, which he was very seriously, by Smythe, and that he had not declared it. Quite rightly, those who are victims are not treated as culprits. And I agree with that. Otherwise, we have to say, it would be obscene to say to the victims, well, because you were a victim a long time ago and you didn't declare it, you are now in trouble. That would be obscene.
Okay, do you think that any senior person in the church, and let's keep it to the bishops for a start, will anybody be disciplined or lose their job as a result of this devastating review?
If it is clear that they committed an offence and the necessary tribunal finds that they did so, they will suffer serious consequences. But I'm not the court. It is not in my hands.
But you are the leader.
I am the leader, and I was checking this morning that there is a proper process being gone through of making sure that there is a proper system of investigation and holding people to account.
Right. So,
And remember, I commissioned this report in order to hold me to account, which is why we're sitting here today.
right, so people will be held to account. You, as
They will be
leader
held-
of the church,
They will be held to account by a tribunal if the tribunal decides they should be held to account. We have an independent justice system.
I mean, victims have been waiting such a
Far
long
too
time,
long.
and they're going to wait longer, it sounds, for justice and for accountability. How can they have confidence that you know the torment that they've gone through over the decades?
How can anyone know their torment in being treated in that way? We can just read about it, hear about it. I spent the whole of Tuesday reading that report, and I've read most of it, of the details at some point before, and I've read many, many reports on abuse. And that was infinitely the worst I've read. And it was, I can't put myself in the place of those who were so betrayed and abused by this evil man. Where the church failed was in numerous ways. We didn't have our act together early enough in terms of having a proper safeguarding system. We only started properly with intensive safeguarding in 2013. It's only in the last 5 or 6 years that we've moved towards an independence in safeguarding, and we've got a lot further to go in that, where we have now a redress system, we have now a pastoral care system, and I've checked and checked again in the last few days that survivors and victims of Smythe who are being re-traumatized by all this are being cared for and have a named person caring for them.
When you look at the cumulative impact of all of this, you know, a boy died in Zimbabwe, there have been suicide attempts, there have been marriages broken down, there have been victims who remain traumatized, as you say, by what they've been through. Is it time now to have all of these abuse allegations taken away from the church, dealt with completely independently?
I would like that to happen.
You can make it happen.
No, I can't. We're not a hierarchy like that. We discussed this not long ago at the House of Bishops. There's been a report that came out by Alexis J. earlier this year saying that's exactly what we should do. And a large number of the professionals in safeguarding, the Dawson safeguarding advisors and officers, said this is a really bad idea. I said it's a really good idea. I was told it's a really bad idea by them. They're the experts. I would like to see much more independence, and I hope that by the time I retire, that there will be much more independence. We've got a group working on it led by the Bishop for Safeguarding at the moment. It is, I think that's the right way to go, but there are plenty of people who are professionals in this area who strongly disagree with me.
You're expected to announce your retirement fairly soon.
Am I?
Well, people are expecting it. Are you going to be announcing your retirement soon?
I'll be announcing my retirement when the King gives me permission to.
But I mean, you haven't got long to go.
No, I haven't. I mean, there's a legal limit at 70.
So do you have any hope that you can get any of this appalling legacy of abuse resolved and justice done before you go?
It would be I hope so. I can't say yes and be sure I'm being honest. Everything on this, as I say, this was 3 months after I came into post.
It's defined your entire time
It's
as
defined this,
Archbishop.
not just this scandal, but safeguarding has defined my entire time. We've made huge progress in some areas. We had one of Makin's very good recommendations is to network together much better round the world the safeguarding systems of each province. So if you're in a civil war in the DRC, child abuse is, it consists of shooting children. It's a complicated cultural thing, and it depends on circumstances. We had a meeting in Bulawayo about a month, 6 weeks ago, with 250 people there from all around the world to get a good system in place. I didn't know he was going to recommend it, but we're ahead of him, thankfully. That sort of thing is improving out of all recognition. Parishes are doing an amazing job with volunteers spotting things that aren't quite right. So are dioceses and arson safeguarding advisors, getting the whole system to work well together and not just be effective, but also to be swift is where I worry. As with this case, and you'd be quite right if you said justice delayed is justice denied.
Well, John Smythe died before the victims could get justice.
Yes, I know. I think if it had gone to court with the police, I don't know what would have happened. He'd have died during the hearing probably. But yes, I entirely agree. Will it happen before I retire? I would love it to. And I am certainly, one of the big changes I'm going to make on this, and we started doing it, is if the victims wish to see me, not going to say to them, you've got to come, or anything horrible like that, then we're putting together a way of them coming, meeting just me, no one else with me, so they can say what they like, and I listen to them and respond as best I can, and they will say to me what you've said to me, no doubt, and you've repeated that they've said, and I will answer them as best I can. But I will now, hopefully as soon as possible, see them, and that will take a top priority.
But I mean, just spell out why that has taken so long, because you promised after our 2017 report you'd meet all the victims.
I know.
You didn't meet any of them for 4 long years, and then it was over Zoom. I mean, yes,
3
it
years,
was the pandemic.
2020. And I agree that was 3 years too long. I said earlier in this interview that was quite wrong. And I should have dealt with that. We're dealing, you can always make excuses. There are no excuses. There's only reasons. And it's my responsibility. I'm not going to, you can take advice and blame other people and all sort of stuff, but it doesn't matter. It's my responsibility that I didn't follow that up quickly enough or well enough.
Are you ever torn between doing what's right and protecting the institution?
Never. That, with the question put like that, I know, because I'm always thinking, I don't give a hang about the institution. I really, genuinely don't. If this report was a lethal blow to the institution, so be it. God will raise up another institution.
So your failing is incompetence rather than cover-up, your personal failing?
Yes. Incompetence, yes. All right, I'll give you that one. Yes, it's not cover-up. There has never been a moment where I have wanted to cover up. I've pushed and asked. If you ask the Archbishop of York, he would say to you that one of the things we talk about most often is, why does everything take so long? But we have now got much better people, much better systems. We need to make sure process is essential in this. You can have kindness without process and nothing happens. Have process without kindness and you do harm.
You've got to have processes that make sure there's action, and kindness and love and gentleness that make sure those actions are healing and supportive and not destructive.
And the church had neither process nor kindness.
It had neither process nor kindness.
Justin Welby, thanks very much.
Thank you.